Hi, good morning, everybody. Gonna switch topics up from the fun, all about sports and entertainment, and something a little bit more serious. I'll give a moment just for the conversation to die down from the previous session. See some folks are still filing in. I like to get to know my audience and kind of understand exactly where you're at this place in time and space. So how many of you out here think that regulation is coming for crypto and it's imminent? Please raise your hand. Yeah, pretty much unanimous. How many of you think that this is going to come at the sacrifice of privacy or the values of decentralization? And I'm assuming that those with their hands up think this is probably a problem. Today I want to talk a little bit about what I think is the most important topic that we should be discussing in Web3 today, just to turn the page on a little bit of a more serious note. And that's the issue of privacy on public blockchains and how we're standing at an inflection point today. However, we have all the tools that we need to make the decisions to go where we need to go to retain that dream of a decentralized future. So my name is Shady. I'm a co-founder of Holonym. Holonym is a zero-knowledge identity startup. And as I was alluding, we are really standing at this precipice today, right? So there's this overall claim, and I think most of you all agree with me, that institutional adoption of blockchain isn't possible with compliance, specifically regulatory compliance. And so you have a bunch of organizations that are tackling this head-on, whether they're issuing their own digital currency backed by the world's reserve currency, or whether they're creating sandboxed environments for institutions to begin playing with the technology, or whether they're looking at bridges from off-chain to on-chain. And lastly, we're seeing some experiments here in the EU on what institutional government type of adoption of blockchain looks like. It's all really, really terribly exciting. However, it's also fraught with danger. So I have a bit of a mathematical scientific background, and I like to think of things in terms of energy landscapes, right? So if our society today, you could think of it as our decision points as a collective is a ball that's moving through an energy space. We're converging to a global, the rate of adoption technology is pushing us towards a global minima, meaning a place that once things settle, it'll be really difficult to get out of that sort of situation. So there's two paths here, and it is definitely a firm stance, so if you disagree with this, come find me after the talk. There's two paths here, one that leads to a non-consensual future where we're all servicing a protocol that's been developed over a series of decisions that tried to make the old hierarchical, patriarchal systems of the past work and integrate with decentralized systems. It's like mixing oil and water, and only one will rise to the top. On the other side, we have something, what I think is a dream that we're all sharing, where we have a protocol that services the people, where we automate away much of the architecture and infrastructure of civics, of institutional infrastructure, of things that require trust and allow us to engage in voluntary crypto commerce with each other, and that accelerates the pace of innovation and progress in our society. So which one is it going to be? And how do we get there? So how do we co-opt this human-centric future where protocols and blockchains and civic infrastructure is servicing individuals, and individuals aren't a thrall to some super intelligent AI that's turning us into paper clips, to make an illusion there. We have all the tools that we need, right? So we have smart contracts that allow us to customize the terms of our coordination in a trustless manner for goal-directed group behavior. So how do we all get there together? And then the answer for that really are going to be variations of DAOs. So really key to that, though, I think, is having embedded systems for identity provenance. What does that mean? It means systems that allow us to know who's engaging with what and how they're coming together as a group to be able to push this forward. It's a bit of a, I would say, like, paradox, though, right? So there's a huge conundrum. If we're using these public smart contract blockchains to coordinate, to do commerce, to vote, to record our search engine history in some tokenized data monetization model, right, where we sell it to to AI companies as opposed to being sold ourselves on behalf of ourselves. It is an issue, right? So how do we kind of deal with this concept of, all right, well, we all need to use these coordination technologies. It needs to be public, it needs to be trustless, but also we need to maintain privacy. A really great example is imagining what on-chain governance in a nation-state's election could look like, right? So say, for example, you have some proposal that's been passed at the nation-state level. Everybody has a DID that starts with 0x123 or something like that. And everyone can perform an action. They can vote yes or no on a specific contract to allocate funding for education or some bridge or what have you. Well, how do you know that each of these DIDs, right, is one person? How do you know that each of those DIDs is not, for example, a contractor that's buying out all of these votes and making sure that their project gets pushed to the top? So it's a huge problem, and this is something that we see all over the map in governance and DAOs, in dApps and DeFi, all sorts of situations right now. If you've been following the curve wars, I think you'll find a really great example of that. But the main issues here, really, the takeaways are Sybil attacks are really common on smart contract blockchains when we're trying to coordinate. So these are people that are, multiplying their identities or sharding their identities and trying to influence the direction of the governance in one direction or the other. Accountability is really limited. So if you just create a DID and don't attach any other information to that, like how do you know that that's a person, right? If they rug pull a contract, that those funds stay in that identity, and unless they go to an off ramp, it's impossible to really have full accountability there. And lastly, privacy is black or white, right? So developers either need to embed doxing into their dApp, or they just need to accept the status quo. So one potential solution to this is reputation. I think reputation systems are going to be key, and we've seen examples of this with like POAP. On-chain graph mechanisms, SBTs, soulbound tokens that attach kind of a sense of reputation to an individual. But on-chain reputation is really, really hard. These projects have kind of just made grasps at something that's ephemeral, that's still difficult to really deploy in practice. So some of the main questions really that we need to solve for on-chain reputation are, how do you verify behavior off-chain? And I think Balaji has a really great mental model for this, right? Where we think of, how do we take things about ourselves off-chain? So for example, I have a PhD, I went to school at Georgetown, I am a member of a couple of professional societies. How do I bring that information, that reputation with me on-chain while maintaining my privacy and still presenting a proof of verification that those are real claims? Non-trivial problem. How do you abate identity resale, right? So if you are if you're attaching reputation to an identity, you're creating value on that identity, and well, maybe it's possible that folks can sell that identity. It's not an easy problem either. And I think critical to this entire point, and I've kind of really underscored this just because the brevity of this talk, usually don't give this short of a talk, but how do you maintain user consent as part of this process, right? So how do you make sure that when folks are coming together to coordinate around smart contract governance, that individuals are properly and informedly consented into each of these processes, and what sorts of information or reputation, what sorts of information is used to build a reputation. And all this comes down to the basic question, how do you maintain privacy? So that's why we built Holonym. Holonym is a throwback reference to Nick Szabo, one of the original cypherpunks who's been fighting for freedom and information, freedom for privacy on the internet, and free association on the internet. And so in '94, Szabo coined both contracts and this concept of a NIM, which actually comes from Greek term for name. A NIM is a piece of information about something that doesn't tell you everything about that something, but tells you just what you need to know to accomplish a certain task or do your business as usual. So a holo is a holistic identity of NIMs. And the way that we do that is we use a zero-knowledge layer or a zero-knowledge cloak to take all of these individual components of an identity. Do I have a pointer here? So we take things like your name, country, social security number from your government ID. We take things such as biometrics, like your face or your fingerprint from a device that you carry with you. Or we also can take signatures that are generated by keys that correspond to a specific web account that are tied to some web activity, right? Your internet footprint. And we can take all of these pieces together. Whoops, sorry guys. We take all of these pieces together, and we are able to create what's called a holo. And from the holo, we can generate proofs. We call these soul-bound token proofs that tell us that this particular account is a single person, has or hasn't voted, hasn't took a transaction, broken it up into tons of little pieces to avoid money laundering, or is of drinking age, for another example. How does it really work? I'm not really going to get into the details here, but basically we take the principle that we separate the identity that's off-chain from anything that happens on-chain. So once you're on-chain, you're completely anonymous, even though you might have verified with a third party such as a government service provider like the DMV or the State Department and gotten a state-issued ID. But as soon as you pass through the relayer, add your hash creds to the Merkle tree, and these hash creds are signed by the issuer so you know that it's verified. And using a ZK proof, you can prove subsegments of that data structure and assign those to any arbitrary address that you might use, for example, for Gitcoin to prove that you're not a bot when you're participating in quadratic funding, or to prove that you are a US resident when you're participating in a regulated DEX, because that's going to happen really soon. So who's using this right now? Our very first client was Andrew Yang. He's a US presidential candidate for the Democratic Party in 2020. He's really pioneered the concept of UBI, really pro Web3. He started a lobbying DAO specifically for advocacy. They had a huge problem where they had an NFT sale. They said, let's start a DAO, collect some money, feed it into elections so that we can get some great legislation passed. However, anybody in the world can buy an NFT, and there are these things called US campaign finance laws that prevent you from really financing US elections from internationally sourced funding. So they had a big problem. Luckily enough, we were sitting together at a hackathon, and we were able to help them out there by providing zero-knowledge proofs of US residency for their members that allowed them to basically vote on proposals that allocated the Treasury specifically for a particular election, while still maintaining engagement with the international community. So now we can do all sorts of complex logic gating. Who else is using it? And this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg here. We've had a couple of different things come up in the past couple months, but Gitcoin is one of the things that we're most excited about, because they're looking for ways to make it really easy for non-Web3 users to be able to onboard and prove that they're not a bot, or prove certain things about their identity in order to participate in these grant-making mechanisms and protocols. However, I think if you've ever used Gitcoin, it's incredibly difficult. It takes like anywhere between 24 hours to a week to verify if you're using something like Bright ID. With us, it's really simple. You literally just do what you would do for Airbnb. We can also support phone number verification as well. So you can prove with your phone number that you're not a bot. So what are some use cases of Holonym? Right now, I kind of alluded to this. Got 2 minutes? Thank you. I've alluded to some of this already, but so we can do things like, for example, prove on-chain that you are a bar-certified attorney, right? And this is incredible because now you can have a Gnosis safe where you can prove privately that the signers on that Gnosis safe have some legal authority, right? And I think this is going to be something that's a game changer, and we're still exploring, very, very early in exploring this. We're also looking at things like medical credentials, PhDs for types of professional societies and DAOs that allow us to bootstrap the reputation of these organizations. I alluded a little bit to the plutocracy democracy use case, but I think the most important are going to be the ability for dApps and protocols to produce proofs that they are in compliance, that their users are having certain traits and attributes that allow them to service them. Whether it's these users aren't breaking up their transactions into multiple pieces, or whether it's something else like that these users are from one jurisdiction or the other. Privacy mechanisms for compliance are really just the start. And I think when you really embrace the concept that Nick Szabo really pioneered of what a NIM is and how you can combine them to create these virtual avatars that interact in cyberspace, that transcend geopolitical boundaries, it opens up a whole beautiful can of worms that we definitely want to go fishing with. So I just want to say thank you to the amazing team that's behind this. It's not just me. We've been at this for about 8 months, and we're more than excited to speak to you if you need zero-knowledge identity proofs for your particular use case, whether it's institutional on off-ramps, or whether it's thinking about compliance, or whether it's about how you can add certain proofs on identity to your DAO to maintain privacy, but while also having accountability. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time, and I'll catch you around.